This is BBC News. I'm Anita McVeigh, live in Dublin. The headlines at 2 o'clock. The Pope has visited the shrine at Knock in the west of Ireland, saying he begs for God's forgiveness over sex abuse allegations linked to the Catholic Church in Ireland.
This open wound challenges us to be firm and decisive in the pursuit of truth and justice.
We'll bring you continuing coverage of the Pope's visit to Ireland as he prepares to say Mass in front of a crowd of 500,000 people in Phoenix Park in Dublin.
And I'm Sean Lay. The other headlines this hour. Senator John McCain, the Vietnam War hero turned senator and US presidential candidate, has died at the age of 81. A search and rescue operation is underway for 2 fishermen after their boat sank off the coast of Great Yarmouth in Norfolk. Emmerson Mnangagwa is sworn in as president of Zimbabwe. The main opposition party boycott the ceremony. British scientists say they've pieced together what dinosaur DNA looks like, and their genetic structure is close to living birds.
Welcome back to Phoenix Park in Dublin. Behind me, performers singing, talking, playing their instruments for the crowd of people who have gathered here for this Mass in Phoenix Park this afternoon, at which a crowd of 500,000 people are expected to listen to Pope Francis say that Mass. Now, I've been away on a very short break, and when I left, although the park was filling up behind me, there were some spaces. I've come back and it's really getting quite full now, and there's much more to this area for the Mass than you can see behind me in the shot as well. But as far as I can see behind me, people everywhere. We're just seeing the President of Ireland, just have seen the President of Ireland, Michael D. Higgins, and the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister of Ireland, Leo Varadkar, arriving for this service. There's been a lot of complimentary commentary in the newspapers today for the speech that Leo Varadkar, the Prime Minister, gave just before the Pope's speech at Dublin Castle yesterday, when Leo Varadkar called for a new chapter in the relationship between the Church and the state in Ireland. Well, I'll tell you more about what's happening here at Phoenix Park. As I say, this Mass due to begin around 3:30. The Pope is expected in around half an hour to arrive here at the park. He'll then travel around the crowd in the Pope Mobile, the crowd divided up into sections here in this vast space. He'll travel around in the Pope Mobile before the Mass, which will be the conclusion of his official reason for being in Ireland this weekend, the World Meeting of Families, an event run every 3 years by the Catholic Church to celebrate the role of the family in the Church. A little earlier today, though, the Pope went to the Shrine of Knock in County Mayo in the west of Ireland, a crowd of around 40,000 people there. And during the short speech that he delivered to the crowd, he spoke of asking for God's forgiveness for the open wound of abuse, and saying also to the crowd that there would be action and justice. Let's listen to this report from our Ireland correspondent, Emma Vardy.
Papal robes beneath an overcoat, Pope Francis began the second leg of his visit in the Irish rain. Knock is one of the most holy sites in Ireland, where an apparition of the Virgin Mary is once said to have appeared. But today, thousands came to see Pope Francis in the flesh.
Good morning.
In his speech to Sunday worshippers, Pope Francis once again addressed the issue of abuse, but today going further, speaking about the need for justice.
Nessuno di noi può esimersi.
None of us can fail to be moved by the stories of young people who suffered abuse, were robbed of their innocence, and who were taken away from their mothers and left with the scars of painful memories. This open wound challenges us to be firm and decisive in the pursuit of truth and justice.
But some survivors do not have confidence in the Vatican's investigations.
They are trying to protect the sort of reputations of these men, or if you like, letting them save face by resigning, rather than being shown and if you like, humiliated in the public eye.
An estimated 500,000 people are gathering at Phoenix Park for this afternoon's papal mass. But the focus of the weekend has been on the survivors of abuse, and how well their concerns are believed to have been addressed will be the measure of how successful this visit is judged to be. Emma Vardy, BBC News, Dublin.
So this is the scene here at Phoenix Park in the centre of Dublin. You can see the stage and altar specially created for this occasion, and the grid, if you like, that's been laid out here in the park for the crowd to filter into. It gives you a sense of the space that I was talking about, and certainly in the area that I'm overlooking, pretty well full of people at the moment, battling through the inclement, windy and somewhat damp weather to see the Pope, who's due to arrive here in the next 25 minutes or so. You're watching continuing coverage of the papal visit to Ireland, almost at its conclusion, really. This event in Phoenix Park in Dublin will be the event which brings to a close this 36-hour trip by Pope Francis to Ireland, at least bringing the public part of it to a close. He will make a further speech to Irish bishops before he leaves Dublin to return to Rome. But it has been a packed agenda in terms of the public engagements he's carried out, and of course amongst those engagements the private meeting with 8 survivors of abuse, clerical and institutional abuse here in Ireland. Well, joining me now to discuss her thoughts on the visit is Baroness Nuala O'Loan. And Baroness, I know you wear many different hats in the various roles that you carry out. Let's talk first of all about that speech at Knock in County Mayo earlier, when the Pope said he was praying for God's forgiveness for the open wounds of abuse. And if I can just refer to the speech as well, he said he was going to pursue truth and justice. Now, he said these words before, but do they have a special significance here in Ireland?
I think, of course, they do. Ireland has suffered very much as a consequence of their child sex abuse scandals. And I think for people here, there is a need to know that not just the priest offenders will be dealt with, but that also the bishops and people like that who may have covered up, that must all be disclosed and dealt with.
Do you think those words are enough? If you take the other references that he's made during the course of this visit, the meeting with the survivors, is that going to be enough to make survivors feel that the church is really grappling with this?
Well, I believe that he told victims who we met yesterday that he took full responsibility for what had happened as the Pope, and that he was very, very sorry for it. And I think that's as wholesome an acknowledgement as you can get. What he has to do now, of course, is to ensure that when he gets back, the work which has been going on, which has been good, continues and is developed in a way which will allow us a real accountability.
And what does that mean? I mean, we've talked about this in various discussions over the last day or so. What does that accountability look like?
I think it will have to look like some kind of independent element inside, outside the Vatican, outside the Curia, responsible for ensuring that the investigations which are done in respect of these very high-level allegations against bishops and cardinals and archbishops, that they are dealt with properly. I think it's the assurance that there has been proper investigation, proper examination, and findings which reflect the evidence which emerged on that. It's not going to be easy, it's going to be a very different way of dealing, but we need it.
And that it's recognised as criminality, I suppose, as opposed to a sin, which is the language that the church often uses.
Yeah, I think the problem we have is that the church now reports all allegations in Ireland, in England and Wales, in many countries. All allegations are reported to the police, to the social services. That's the first and most important thing. If the police prosecute, and if the perpetrator is convicted, if it's a priest, they will be laicized, they'll be out of priesthood. Then there's the question of what does the church do after they're laicized? Does the church have a continuing role, having put them out? So then the church has to find ways of dealing with that. The church also has to find ways of dealing with the situation in which the police and the statutory authorities say we have no case to answer here. But there is an allegation. And so the bishops and the priests and the safeguarding authorities have to work out how to deal with that, have to assess risks, have to see what's happened. And that's a very complicated sort of end of things. The first thing, the most important thing is report to the police. It happens now. It didn't happen in the past, but it does happen now. Let the prosecutions take their course, let convictions happen, people will go to jail, then they'll be laicized. And now the church must deal with the other situations which aren't dealt with in that way.
Let's look at the other side of this visit, look at the faith that we see in the people who are coming to this event today. It does remind us, doesn't it, that the Catholic faith is still extremely strong in Ireland, that the majority of people profess to be Catholics, and I guess there is a sense of renewal for many of them, given that it's almost 40 years since the last Pope to come to Ireland was here, John Paul II. Yes. Given everything that the Church has been through in the intervening years, it must be very important that a Pope has decided to come back here.
I think it's profoundly important, and I think the people of Ireland welcome him. I know the people of Northern Ireland would have loved him to go up there, and I was very pleased in his speech in Knock today. He referred to the Northern Ireland Peace and Reconciliation process. He was encouraging everyone to engage further with that process and to make reconciliation real. So I think for the people of Ireland it's important. It's important for ordinary, everyday families across the world. This is a world meeting. That it's here is important. But it's important because families in their different manifestations experience so many different difficult situations. Coming together, they learn that they're not alone in the difficulties. They learn that there are those there to support them, and they feel that their families are part of the bigger family of the church. And there is certainly, I think, an affirmation of faith as you look across Phoenix Park today and you see nearly 500,000 people gathering in the rain and the wind.
So everyone from the families here today to parish priests to the Pope himself, his officials in the Vatican will, and many others besides, will take a look at this visit and now go away and assess the impact of it.
Yeah, I mean, there are people from 116 different countries across the world here today. So it's important to recognise their presence from Syria, from Spain, from India, from Africa, and they're here and they're celebrating family with us. And I think that's important too. This is a world meeting of families, for families, Catholic families from across the world. And it's a wonderful occasion, and we're very glad the Pope has come.
Baroness Luda Olo, thank you very much for your thoughts today. Well, one report that came out overnight in the United States on CBS News was about some allegations being levelled against Pope Francis, and I spoke to our religion editor Martin Bashir a little earlier and asked him about this report.
Archbishop Vigano was the Vatican's ambassador to America between 2011 and 2016, and he is claiming that in 2013, very soon after Pope Francis was elected, he had a conversation with the Pope and warned him about Cardinal Thomas McCarrick, who of course resigned just a month ago as a cardinal in Washington, D.C. The allegations surrounded the abuse of some seminary students. CBS have obtained this letter. It's 11 pages long, and I want to quote to you from it. It says, "Pope Francis must be the first to set a good example to cardinals and bishops who covered up McCarrick's abuses, and he should resign along with all of them." The Vatican has not responded in any ways to these claims. We've made repeated requests for interviews from a spokesperson. They've said nothing. But interestingly, a source close to Archbishop Vigano has said that he has no evidence for this conversation having taken place.
There's no documentary evidence or evidence of any sort being presented.
There's no emails, there's no correspondence. And what's also interesting about it is if the conversation took place in 2013, why did Archbishop Vigano not do something about it in the intervening 5 years? Again, there's no reference to a continuing conversation. It's also worth saying that Archbishop Vigano has been part of a very conservative group of Catholics in the hierarchy of the Vatican. And there's a sense that the timing of this is not entirely an accident, because of course Pope Francis is here in Ireland addressing decades of child sexual abuse allegations. So there's some suggestion that there may be a conspiracy, as it were, amongst some. But we haven't been able to have a reaction from the Vatican, and Archbishop Vigano has also declined any requests for interview.
Can I also get your thoughts, Martin, on what Pope Francis has been saying, especially this morning at Knock, about the abuse scandal here in Ireland, about how the Church should deal with it?
Well, as you know, you've been listening to him yourself. You've heard him speak of repentance, of remorse. The problem that many survivors speak about is a complete absence of remedies. Many survivors are saying that the Church needs to embrace a zero-tolerance policy towards anybody in the clerical establishment who may have allegations against them. They're also saying that the Church needs to establish some protocols for transparency and accountability. And again, there just doesn't seem to be any of that.
In so much as you can read into what is a sentence, though, did the Pope go further in Knock this morning when he talked about decisive action to secure the pursuit of truth and justice?
He's used that phrase. I heard him use that phrase in Bangladesh when I travelled with him to Myanmar and Bangladesh. And that's part of the problem. The language is absolutely right and clear. But where are the policies? And that's not me saying that. That's victims of abuse repeatedly saying, when is Pope Francis going to produce the evidence of policies that are being applied right across the Church? Now, of course, the challenge is we're talking about an institution with 1.2 billion members across the world. And so it's very hard again to see how you can institute those policies universally. Nevertheless, survivors are saying that unless Pope Francis gives very clear policies, then these words are simply words. And I'm reminded of that verse in the New Testament, in the Epistle of James, where he says, faith without deeds is dead.
Martin Bashir, our religion editor, talking to me a little earlier today, and we're just going to leave you for the moment with this view across Phoenix Park. I don't know if you can pick it up from the point of view of our camera, but certainly looking at it, you can see the crowds accumulated in front of the altar stroke stage that has been specially created for this occasion. The weather, though, is really atrocious, I have to say. Hardy souls out there. I don't know if you can see the rain being blown across in great sheets. So we are expecting the Pope to arrive shortly and to move around the crowd in the Pope-mobile. We will be back for more from Phoenix Park very soon.
Anita McVeigh there in Phoenix Park. We'll speak to her a little later. And there's the picture. Despite the weather, despite the noise, the wind and the rain, people are there and they'll be excited by the prospect of seeing the Pope as he tours around the site of the event in just a few minutes' time. Now, tributes are being paid to one of America's most respected politicians, John McCain, who has died at the age of 81. The Vietnam War hero was a Republican senator defeated by Barack Obama in the presidential election 10 years ago. On Friday, Senator McCain's family announced that he had decided to stop treatment for a brain tumour. Chris Buckler looks back at his life.
John McCain was a politician of principle, a patriot who believed in his country and fought for it at tremendous cost to himself. As a young Navy pilot, he was shot down over Hanoi, interrogated and tortured. His captors saw a potential propaganda coup when his father became commander of US forces in Vietnam and offered him release. But John McCain refused despite the many beatings he'd suffered. On his return, he was hailed as a war hero and entered politics, and would eventually spend 35 years representing Republicans inside Congress. But he was fiercely independent and often spoke out against the party, notably challenging the influence of big money on American politics.
I will break the iron triangle in Washington of money, lobbying, and legislation, and they know that would be very, very disruptive financially to a lot of people's lives.
He may have challenged Washington, but he was respected here too. And in 2008 he was selected as a Republican presidential candidate. But his campaign was not without mistakes, and he was criticised for choosing Sarah Palin as his running mate. Ultimately, he was